to welcome to the show right now, Mr. Kal Penn. Kal, how are you?
Good, how are you?
This is great to meet you.
It's good to meet you.
I've seen you on TV and movies for so many years, and now you're right here in front of me.
I am. I love coming into this building.
I'm impressed. I know the same is not to be said on your end here, but this is so awesome to see you.
Likewise. Thanks for the love. Gosh,
no problem.
I was just talking to the Harold and Kumar guys because we're trying to get this animated series off the ground,
right?
And we were talking about how I did not have a career before that first movie, right? And it was the fact that the movie tanked at the box office. So hearing you say things like that, talking about years and years, like we did this movie, had no idea it was going to take off, did terribly in the box office. Fans found it on DVD, bought it, gave it to each other, and then suddenly
it became a huge cult classic.
Things. It's like, I am deeply indebted to everything that you just said because I feel like it's the only reason I have a career. So thank you.
Well, I do appreciate that, but let me cut this down a little bit here because I'm not one of those people that knows you or appreciates you from Harold and Kumar.
Awesome.
I know you as Taj.
Oh, man. Okay, so you actually do go back a little further.
I went to the movies when that came out, and that's where I remembered you. And then when I saw you and everything else, even all the way up through House, I'm like, that's Taj. Isn't it weird that no matter what an actor can do in their career, there's just one role that reaches out to one person or a group of people. They know your whole body of work, but that's how they remember you or how they choose to remember you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that about this business. I think like there's Tom Hanks is obviously incredible.
Right.
The first thing I saw him in was Big.
Right.
And so he's always the dude from Big. And I mean, look, he's somebody I really revere and would love to work with. Same thing with Denzel Washington. The first time I saw him in was a little movie called Mississippi Masala that came out in like the early 90s.
You know how I know that movie? Because that was one of those movies they would play late night on the movie channel because there was some skin in it.
Yeah, that's
and you
right.
would tape me like, if you look through the old paperback there for the guide, it would say R and it would say nudity. And you're like, oh, I got to see that. It's on at 11:30.
Yeah. But that's how I, first identified him. And then, seeing his film he did with Kenneth Branagh later in high school, I was like, oh, this is the guy from Mississippi Masala. And then, you realize, okay, I'm an idiot, and he's Denzel Washington. And
it's interesting you brought those two actors up because depending on who you talk to, how they remember those two, you can kind of guess what their age is, like where they grew up, and it's like, how do you know guy? You knew him from Big. Yeah. Some people knew him as a bizarre drunk uncle on Family Ties, or bosom buddies, and then some people will say, oh, he's the guy from, now I'm forgetting the movie where he's stranded with the volleyball.
The FedEx movie?
Yeah, the FedEx movie. That's pretty much what everyone calls it, right? This is
Castaway.
Castaway. There it is. These are guys that had long careers, and you'll have a long career, so you still got a lot of projects coming that somebody's going to remember you say, your project coming out next. They're like, oh, that's the guy from Battle Creek.
Awesome. I'll take it.
It's also cool, too, that you embrace the Harold and Kumar thing because, like you said, it wasn't a big hit in the box office. So nobody expected it to be a big deal. And then it became a big deal. And then it became a really big deal when Neil Patrick Harris became more famous from How I Met Your Mother. Yeah. And then John was in Star Trek and you're in House. And then you're in this new movie here, which we haven't plugged yet. Bhopal, right? That you embraced this thing. You did two more, right? It was Guantanamo Bay, and then there was a Christmas one. Movie. And now you got the animated series, which is, I'm amazed that you're still going to run with this.
Look, this character is cooler than I will ever be in my life. So I'm fine with playing that. But I think, you have a soft spot for a character like that actually allows you to continue to get more work. And I think that the thing that I find so fascinating is some of the directors have had the privilege of working with in things that are different than the comedic stuff. So Mira Nair in this movie called The Namesake, Bryan Singer in Superman Returns, Howard Gordon, I had this 4-episode arc on 24 a few years ago. All of that, I think, came out of the fact that Harold and Kumar had taken off. And so of course I have this relationship with that movie where I'm still fascinated that people talk about it and see it, and
I just find that really cool that you've embraced it because I'm sure people still come up to you and say, oh my God, Kumar, and do they try off in your pot or cheeseburgers or something, right? Yeah. And that you're like, I've done other things, but you're like, oh yeah, that's cool, that's great.
Look, obviously you hope that people see your other things, but if your only job hazard in life is that people want to high five you and give you weed on the street, then you should not complain.
Let's talk about your movie here for a little bit. Sure. Bhopal, A Prayer for Rain. Now, the event itself, when it happened, I was 6 years old. So, I didn't really know what was going on.
Yeah.
Then I saw the movie was coming out and I read it and oh my God, like who knew it was such a big deal to a younger person until now this is being brought to light. I don't think a lot of people remember this incident. And just to read everything about what happened, and nobody was really, like, they named names, but nobody was really held accountable for all of it.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing to revisit and discover when we made the film. I was also a kid when the actual events happened, and so I didn't remember very much of it. We did study it a little bit in a class I took in college, but it wasn't until I read the script. Essentially, what had happened in 1984 was there was this American company called Union Carbide that's now owned by Dow Chemical. And they built this pesticide factory in the middle of India with seemingly good intentions, creating a product that people needed around the world, reducing famine, providing jobs for people. What ended up happening was a combination of sort of greed on the part of the corporation, plus things like government corruption and lax safety standards and oversight and things like that. There was this awful disaster. 40 tons of a toxic gas was released. Killed about 5,000 people instantly.
Well, it was really, just so people know, it was released overnight.
Yeah.
Not like they purposely did it, but it happened. Right. People were sleeping.
Yeah.
So nobody knew that it was going on. And then the next day, the ones who did survive or came into the area, all these people were dead.
Yeah, exactly. It was horrible if you look at some of the archival footage and things like that. And after that was really when things got even more problematic because you had different parties holding different people accountable. The company saying that they only had a 51% stake in this interest. There were settlements that were called into question legally. The point is, I think what the writers tried to do with the movie, and I hope they've done it successfully, is that it was a really complicated issue. I think a lot of times when you look at this, it's very easy to say this was just corporate greed or this was just government corruption, and this was really a horrible situation. There are still people suffering the consequences of this. So this site was never fully cleaned up.
Obviously, people who lost loved ones and friends and what have you, they're still suffering from that. But the area itself is still somewhat contaminated.
Yeah. And so you have all the makings of, when I read the script, the first thing I thought of was how come nobody's talked about this? There have been some fantastic documentaries and articles written about this, but nobody's made a fictionalized adaptation of this. From the purposes of just storytelling, the fact that this is a story that's really interesting. And then secondarily, you talk to groups like, I didn't realize anyone would have a stake in this, but Amnesty International has been partnering with the film's distributors on releasing it because they've had this active campaign seeking justice for the survivors for a long time. And, as an actor, you don't necessarily think about all those things when you decide to make a movie, but it was a fascinating realization of these real life events. 30 years ago, we think is a long time, but it's really not a long time. There are still people who are dealing with the consequences of this thing, and it was really interesting to get to know a lot of these people and see their life story, see how they react to a film like this.
Was this project something that you sought out, or was this approached to you?
The writer emailed me, actually. He emailed me, it's been 5 years, and he said he wrote this script, wanted me to take a look at it. My first reaction was I was impressed with the complexity and the way it was written. Huge tragedy, obviously. Then I sat down to talk to him, and I said, why do you want to make this movie? And he basically outlined, how he grew up in that part of India, why he wanted to tell the story. Really passionate. And so I said, sure, why not? I mean, it was a small movie. This is not the kind of thing that it's a big payday or that you even think is going to get distribution. Selfishly, Martin Sheen had already signed on, and I was a big Martin Sheen fan, so it seemed like the nice combination of something I wanted to do artistically plus a story that I thought was compelling. What's
it like working with Martin Sheen, knowing that he did West Wing, and then you also got a chance to work in the Obama administration?
I was a Martin Sheen fan for ages, and I was a huge West Wing fan also. We've never talked about the actual versus the fictitious West Wing, but it's interesting. A lot of my DC friends, obviously huge West Wing fans, also, and so I got a lot of texts and emails like, "Hey, what's Martin Sheen actually like?" And
wasn't it amazing during that time, during the Bush administration, that people were viewing the fictitious television president as being more of the president than the guy who was actually in office?
These things always go through fluctuations. It depends on who. I think wasn't the West Wing did it start during the Clinton years? Is that
I think it started in the late 90s,
Yeah, because I remember talking to some of the producers. One of our writers on House was a writer on the West Wing, and I met some of those guys in the past, and they said, when the West Wing was at its height and the Clinton administration was at its height, they would sometimes go to DC to shoot things and, sort of get this VIP treatment of real, Clinton staffers showing them around DC and things like that.
Because he was a Democrat in the movie. I mean, in the TV show.
Yeah, but still, I mean, I think it's interesting to see how different administrations operate differently. Like the Bush administration obviously operating very differently. The Obama administration, the president's very family oriented, so you see much less of the drinking scotch, playing cards thing that you might think of from the 90s happening now. I just think that's so fascinating. I'm not a presidential historian, obviously, but it's it's an interesting thing. I think the way that different people lead.
Well, you should know a little bit. You worked for the guy.
Yeah, I know about this particular, but I feel like I'm not equipped to make these comparisons that I'm trying to make for.
Do you think a show like that could have succeeded nowadays with the Obama administration in power?
Yeah, you got House of Cards.
Yeah, well, that's just because everyone loves Kevin Spacey being super evil in the thing.
I think. I mean, by the time I got to, when I was working at the White House, it was interesting to see how little the West Wing mirrored what actually happens. There are some things that are accurate, like, these walk and talk meetings where you need to get a meeting done and you only have 2 minutes when somebody.
You got to walk them right down to the car.
Have to walk to the. So that's all. That kind of stuff is true. But then the things like let's order Chinese food. It's 2 a.m. We're pulling an all nighter. Beers and Chinese food. I was really excited about that concept. And then you start pulling your all nighter on someone's like, no, that's not reality. Secret Service won't let you bring food in here. There's a vending machine in the basement though. If you're hungry, I'm like, oh, boo.
They don't have the chef up late at night cooking and
not on the staff level. I think hopefully if the president's working late, they've got that.
You were the former director. Former director of the White House of Public Engagement.
So I was one of several associate directors of public engagement. I worked mostly on issues related to young people. So the office used to be called. This is kind of a little bit of boring insider speak. It used to be called the Office of Public Liaison. I think it was started by the Nixon administration. It was basically a place where if you were an advocate or a lobbying organization, this was a place you could go to make your voice heard. The president campaigned on this promise of, wanting to be more accessible, wanting people to have a seat at the table. So it changed the dynamic of the office so that there was a person there basically could listen to any interest group, organization, community that had a particular grievance or wanted to make their voice heard on a piece of legislation or what have you. So I worked on the youth component of that, which I loved. I mean, it was, and I think still is, a lot of really important, interesting things. The Affordable Care Act, when it was going through Congress, the piece of it, the outreach piece of it in particular that I worked on was the being able to stay on your parents' health insurance plan until you're 26. That was fascinating to see because you had youth advocates, young people who were Democrats, Republicans, Independents saying, we want you to put in the bill, we want the president to vouch for you should stay on your parents' health insurance plan until you're 28.
Yeah.
And then you had older folks say, no way, that's too expensive. Make it 21, make it 22. And then seeing when he came up with the 26 number, how to fund
I'm glad
that.
they changed it because I don't get that. When you're 21, 22, you're still in college.
Yeah.
So if you're in college and a lot of the times your parents are helping you pay for college or they're paying for college, but you're not ready to go out into the world yet at 21, 22 because you're still doing school. So then all of a sudden you have the major financial responsibility of paying for your health care.
Yeah. Well, there's that, and there's also all these folks who either choose not to go to school or they're in community college or trade school or military or just seeking unemployment, right out of high school, and it's challenging for them. I was fascinated by the concept that, look, 40 million new people are getting health insurance, and I'm working on this little component outreach side that's based on young people under 26.
Right.
It's just fascinating. And then things like the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell or doubling Pell Grants for college. I mean, these are things that are, if you look at older people over 35, they view it as a Democrat or Republican issue. But if you look at younger people, they're like, no, of course we should get this done. Why is it taking so long to get this done? So it was an interesting dynamic. I really enjoyed it.
This was an appointed position, right?
Yeah.
They came and asked you if you would come on board and help out?
Yeah, a lot of the new, especially in the new administration, a lot of the early appointees are people who had worked on the candidates' campaigns. This happens on the gubernatorial side, senator, obviously the president. And I joined the Obama campaign in 2007 when before the Iowa caucuses. So there were 10 Democrat, 10 Republicans running, for this thing. He was down 40 points in the polls. There was a writer's strike in Hollywood, so I couldn't see anything anyway. So I started volunteering, and it was interesting to see how this momentum picked up. Really, hopefully, but unexpectedly. And the next thing 2 years go by, and he's the president, and you don't really say, no, I have another stoner movie to make. You say, yes, I'm honored to serve my country. And
it'd be funny if Obama's looking for some ideas and give me the Kumar kid. How long did you have the position for?
I was there for 2 years.
For 2 years. Yeah. Now, was that the length of the position, or did you decide to leave?
So these are open in the sense that they're, you get sworn in. It's considered at the pleasure of the president. So you can serve for all 8 years, or a lot of people take. And I have to say, this is not a particularly unique thing to me. Like, right. I know because I'm in the public eye, a lot of people feel like it is, but there were plenty of people who are doctors and CEOs and professors and grad students and lawyers that took a year off or 2 years off or 5 years off to serve in the administration. So in my case, I said I was just going to do it for a year. And I was going to take a sabbatical from acting, do that for a year, and then go back to acting. And I realized probably 6 months into working at the White House that the federal government operates so painfully slowly that nothing that I was working on was actually going to get done in a year. So I extended it a second year, and then that's when a lot of the things I
remember, because you had just left House.
I loved you, Lori, man. That working on that show was a blast. That was the thing when that came up. It was like, how do I explain to my employers that there are so many people that, for creative differences in the artistic world in general, creative differences, or somebody doesn't see eye to eye, or because of a creative decision they're written off of a show. How the hell am I going to justify to this guy that, like, I'm really having a great time playing Dr. Kuttner?
Yeah.
Certainly my family loves the fact that I'm playing a doctor. So
and based on your character, it would seem like you didn't, because your character didn't take any of House's shit.
Yeah.
And it was just like, and then to the point, it was like, I don't need to listen to you, where everybody else was trying to get ahead, and though they were getting browbeaten by him, and you're like, fuck this guy. Yeah. I know what I'm doing. Totally. I'm leaving.
That's what was so much fun about playing Kuttner was he never took House's shit. He was always doing his own thing.
You're the guy in the office that said, I'm not putting up with the boss's bullshit. I'm leaving, and I'm getting another job. It was the perfect role. Everyone's like, I wish I could do that.
Yeah, it was a fun role. It was a fun job, and I'm working with David Shore, who created House. I'm working with him and Vince Gilligan on this new show called Battle Creek. Hopefully
comes out in 2015, right?
2015, yeah.
Is it new fall, or is it mid?
I think it's mid-season.
Mid-season,
yeah. Although it's on CBS, they have a tremendously successful fall show. So knock on wood, they can put us in somewhere where we do well.
Did you see Ryan Reynolds at all still? Or
I haven't seen him in a while. I run into him every so often. I mean, that was my first movie. Van Wilder. He's awesome. I love that guy.
You ever think that maybe somewhere down the line, like, why don't we just do another Van Wilder, see where it goes?
I don't know if I would do it. I did a second one.
Like, you're working at the company he now runs,
Oh, that's an interesting concept, actually. I did a second one and had a blast.
Yeah, The Rise of Taj.
The Rise of Taj. I don't know it was very good, but I had a good time doing it. Your listeners are all like, no, it was a piece of shit. Why did you?
Dude, people are watching those Van Wilder and American Pie, charity run or whatever they're doing, the naked run on that shows up on cable.
The first one was great. Ryan was fantastic. The second one, I was happy to do, and I had fun doing it.
Ryan's character was great in there. The movie probably could have stood alone if it was just focused on him, but the fact that you were there giving this angle where he was becoming kind of fatherly to you and passing on his wisdom and the way to conduct your life, and when you got so mad when you were like, I went to smack Clem, and that whole little montage you did.
That monologue in the beginning. So it wasn't all scripted that way. The writers are obviously very funny guys. I was so thankful that they and the directors and Ryan, when we went to shoot that scene, were like, do you guys want to improv a little bit? I'm like, yes. That's my whole high school, college, post-college background was a lot of improv. And Ryan's like, yeah, let's do it. Just keep the camera rolling. And for me, I didn't have the balls to say something like that.
And those are usually the best scenes.
And it turned out to be, I didn't have the guts to say it because it was my first movie. I'm like, what am I going to tell a Hollywood director to keep the camera rolling? Right. Ryan's like, don't worry about it. I got this. Let's just do this. Keep going. Don't cut. Keep rolling for 3 minutes. And we just kept going, and he kept feeding off of things that
and they wound up using it.
And they wound up using all of it, which was awesome.
You're a big comic book fan?
I was more back in the day. I'm less so now, but I read a lot of Spiderman. Really loved being the Superman. I got cut out of most of the Superman movie, but it was fun to do just by virtue of the fact that history of it goes back to radio, which I think is fascinating.
Because I just saw that you did This Week in Marvel's podcast.
Yeah.
Where you got to talk about Spider-Man, which I thought was really cool. And I was going through it and everything. I'm like, I wonder if he's a big fan of the world. Because I wanted to ask you, what do you think of that trailer that Ryan Reynolds put out, politicking to be Deadpool?
I didn't see it.
You didn't see it?
No.
They made a trailer because the movie was in limbo for so long with 20th Century Fox about getting it made. Ryan and I'm forgetting the director's name. They put it together, made their own trailer because now the Deadpool movie is approved.
Yeah.
And everybody's pushing to make him Deadpool.
I gotta see that.
Well,
but I can tell you,
once we're done, I'll show it to you. But
please.
it's one of the most funniest, brutally graphic things that you've seen. And it's only within like 2 minutes, and he's perfect for the part.
I want to see right now.
So let's plug the movie here. Bhopal, A Prayer for Rain is open now. It's in New York and Los Angeles.
It's in New York this weekend. So it opened on Friday here in New York at the East Village Cinema, and opens in LA next weekend.
Okay.
And then Chicago the weekend after that. So the website is Bhopal Movie, BHOPAL movie.com. And I'll tweet a little more about where it's open.
Are they doing a full rollout, or is this going to be something that eventually goes on like video on demand?
I think they're doing a full rollout. It's going to depend on how popular it is in the cities that it initially launches in. It's kind of an interesting concept for a release. It's a global movie, so we shot it. There was three American actors, a bunch of Indian actors, a European production team, in addition to the Indian production team, and it's opening here first, and then it rolls out in South Asia, India, Singapore, the UK, Germany, Israel. So
it'll be somewhere. You get a chance to see it.
It'll be somewhere, I'm curious, but see it here. See it in America.
And Kal Penn on Twitter, you're very active on Twitter. I like the fact that you criticize watching C-SPAN. That you sit there and you're watching stuff sometime and go, who said this was a great idea for the reporter to ask this guy?
Oh, that was yesterday. That drove me crazy. I forget what I was even
There was one
watching.
like a week or two ago, you were going off about people asking questions of the press secretary.
It was an absurd question.
Yeah.
Like at some point, because I feel like cable news has gotten to the place where it used to be, you're watching ridiculousness. And now they're just straight up asking the press secretary, and then yesterday asking the president ridiculous questions. Like, just ask a normal, thoughtful question. He's not going to give you talking points.
I like how you were trying to improve the questions for the people asking them by making them even more absurd.
Yeah, no, I had to make them more absurd. Like, what happens if... Well, what did I tweeted something ridiculous. Like, what happens if the Republican promise of ISIS putting Ebola up your butt?
Yeah, you wrote this one here. Ha, ha, ha. The press is absurd. Some old guy asked the press secretary what the plan is if a psychopath gets Ebola to infect people. Yeah. This is a great movie idea.
It's a fantastic movie idea. And the way he asked it, I think this tweet was mostly geared towards people who were actually watching it. Because the way he asked it was, first of all, he looked totally disheveled. Not that I want to make fun of the way somebody looks, but there was a generational divide there. Press Secretary Josh Earnest, very young, very knowledgeable guy. This guy was clearly trying to stir the pot and was like, if your question is about national security and how it pertains to diseases, then ask a question about national security and how it pertains to diseases. Don't ask a hypothetical question about whether terrorists are gonna weaponize Ebola and whether or not you have a plan for it. I mean, these are like, ask a fucking normal question. I thought it was hilarious.
Who's gonna win Dancing with the Stars?
Exactly.
Kal Penn on Twitter, the movie Bhopal, Prayer for Rain out now. Kal Penn, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
This was really cool to meet you, and hope you come back again sometime.
Thank you. I appreciate it.